I was deployed in Kandahar when my wife decided to end our marriage. With a 3-sentence email. No warning. Just a PDF and a man I'd never seen sleeping in my bed, walking my dog, drinking from my mug. She thought I wouldn't notice. That, I'd be too far away to stop her, too distracted to fight back. But what she didn't know was that I had already prepared, that I was watching, and that she left behind one clue. One tiny mistake that would unravel everything, not just for her, but for the entire operation behind her. They thought they were stealing my life. But they didn't know who they were dealing with. My name is Nathan Briggs, and this is the story of how I exposed them all. I read the divorce email in the middle of a sandstorm. Visibility was 5 feet at best, and the grit clung to everything. My boots, my skin, my tongue. I remember blinking against the wind as I scrolled through it. 3 sentences, no greeting, no goodbye. Just a PDF attachment titled, "Let's be adults about this." 13 years of marriage, and she ended it with a subject line. I didn't say anything to anyone. Just closed the laptop, walked through the storm to the showers, and stood under cold water until I couldn't feel my face. When I got back to the bunk, I typed a single word in reply. Understood. Then I hit send and stared at the screen until it went black. That was 4 months into my deployment. Kandahar, 112 degrees in the shade. I was Staff Sergeant Briggs, 82nd Airborne. To my team, I was calm, collected, steady. The guy who always knew what to do when the shit hit the fan. But that night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, asking myself the one question I couldn't answer. When did she stop loving me? Becky used to say I was the strongest man she knew. Quiet strong, not the showy kind. I guess she forgot strength doesn't mean silence. I hadn't seen it coming. Or maybe I had. Maybe I just didn't want to believe it. 6 months before I deployed, things had started to shift. Not big dramatic changes, just the kind that sneak in when you're not looking. She started working late. Joined a gym she rarely used. Bought new clothes that didn't look like her. Changed her phone password. Said it was for privacy. I remember lying next to her one night, listening to her breathing, feeling like a stranger had crawled into my bed. I didn't ask questions, didn't check her texts. That's not who I am. I was raised to trust, to believe that love meant giving someone the benefit of the doubt. But I'm also a soldier, and soldiers prepare for what-ifs, so I made some moves. Quiet ones. I opened a second bank account, rented a storage unit across town, moved important documents there. Birth certificates, marriage license, my grandfather's watch, my mother's old silver. Things that mattered. Things I didn't want to lose. I didn't think I'd need them. But part of me knew. The day I left, she hugged me at the airport like I was an old friend going on a long trip. "Stay safe," she said, eyes dry. No tears. No come home to me. Just safe. Like safety was more important than return. I told myself it was the stress, that she didn't want to break down in public, that maybe the tears would come later. They didn't. Deployment gives you a lot of time to think, more than you want sometimes. On patrol, my mind would drift back to her. To the way she used to laugh when I sang off key in the kitchen. The way she'd fall asleep with her hand on my chest, like anchoring herself. I held on to those memories like lifelines, trying to believe they were still real, until the email. I didn't tell anyone, not right away. But Wilson, my bunkmate, he knew something was off. "You good, man?" he asked, not looking up from his book. "Yeah," I said. "Just some stuff back home." He nodded. That was it. We don't push in the army. We wait until someone's ready. 2 weeks passed. I kept my head down, did my job, ate in silence, slept with one eye open. The ache wasn't loud, it was quiet, gnawing, constant, like a crack in your armor that you can't tape shut. Then came the bank notification, $88,500 withdrawn, in a single transfer. I remember staring at the screen in the mess hall, my tray of eggs gone cold, my fork frozen in midair. Our joint account, what was left of it, had been wiped out. The savings we'd built over years, gone. I didn't speak, just set my tray down and walked out. At the phone center, I called the bank. listened to the hold music while sand blew against the windows like rain. When the voice came on, I asked about the transaction. There had been others, they said. Small amounts, starting the day after I deployed, growing week by week. Then the big one, 2 hours before the email. I hung up and leaned against the wall, heart pounding in that hollow, heavy way that only betrayal brings. Around me, guys laughed on calls with their kids, their wives, said I love yous and made weekend plans. I stood there, surrounded by normal, feeling like a ghost. That's when I knew. This wasn't just a woman who fell out of love. This was war, and I had no intention of losing. I didn't yell, didn't scream. That's not who I am. But I opened my laptop that night, logged into our home security system, one Becky probably forgot I had access to, and watched. A man I'd never seen walked our dog, drank from my coffee mug, wore my Seahawk sweatshirt, and Becky, she was laughing. In the kitchen I'd renovated with my own hands. The next morning, I made a list. Called a buddy who'd gone into law. Reviewed the VA loan paperwork. Checked the status of my pension, not out of panic, but precision. Focus. She thought I was thousands of miles away, defenseless. But I had something she didn't. Discipline, clarity, and one clue she hadn't covered her tracks on. I still remember the exact moment everything shifted. From hurt to calculation. It was sometime around 3 a.m. on a Thursday. I'd been lying on my cot, eyes wide open, listening to the faint hum of the HVAC system and the low, half-muffled voices of 2 privates laughing outside the tent. I was thinking about that man, Jeremy, using my things. Touching my life like it was his. I wasn't angry, not in the way people usually mean it. It was more surgical, a clean break between what I felt and what I would do. I wasn't going to retaliate. I was going to respond. There's a difference. I started small, called James, my old army buddy turned lawyer, the kind of guy who never left a stone unturned. Told him I needed help, discreet, fast, thorough. Told him about the bank transfers, the email, the man, the dog, the sweatshirt. James didn't interrupt, just listened, took notes. When I finished, he said, "We'll need documentation. Everything." Already started, I told him. That's how it began. Emails, recordings, statements, surveillance footage from my own home. I was thousands of miles away and still knew what time she took the trash out, what brand of wine they drank. When he parked his truck too close to the lawn I used to mow every Sunday. This wasn't just some affair. It was premeditated, precise. A slow erasure of everything I'd built, the money, the house, my identity. But she made one mistake. She forgot who she married. Becky thought I was the kind of man who'd come back heartbroken, maybe broken altogether, who'd take the divorce, the financial wipeout, the betrayal, and just walk away to rebuild quietly. She didn't know I'd already been rebuilding. She didn't know I'd seen it coming. She didn't know I had proof. One night, I watched footage from the kitchen camera. They were standing by the counter, Becky and Jeremy. She was showing him a folder, smiling. He was laughing, holding up a document like he was proud of it. I couldn't read the text, but I recognized the layout. It was the refinance application, the one with my signature, or a poor imitation of it, and that's when I saw it. The initial. My name is Nathaniel Briggs. I always sign with N.A. Briggs. My dad did it that way. His dad too. A tradition, a legacy. On that form, it was N.E. Briggs. I paused the video. There it was. The clue, small, insignificant looking, but massive. Like finding a hairline fracture in a suspension bridge. No one else might notice, but I knew what it meant. She hadn't just taken my money. She'd forged my name. That changed everything. I called James the next morning. Told him about the footage, the mismatch in the initials. Sent him everything I had. Screen captures, logs, timestamps. He said, "This isn't just a divorce anymore. This is fraud." He asked if I wanted to go nuclear. I didn't even hesitate. Yes. When I got back stateside, I didn't go home. Didn't call her. Didn't tell her I'd landed. I checked into a cheap motel off I-90 under a different name and met James at a diner an hour outside Spokane. He handed me a folder, thicker than I expected. "This is everything," he said. "You were right about the forgery. Got a handwriting analyst to confirm. But that's not even the worst part." He pulled out a separate document, another application. She listed Jeremy as a co-applicant on your house, with your name forged. She used your VA loan to try and cash out equity, over $300,000. My hands were still. My face too. But inside, something went cold. Like a chamber had closed shut. I whispered. "She tried to erase me." James nodded. I leaned back in the booth, listening to the hum of the ceiling fan. The clink of forks on ceramic. A little girl giggled 2 tables away, eating pancakes with her dad. I stared at them for a second, thinking about all the things I'd fought to protect overseas, and how I'd missed the battle at home. "She left a trail," I said quietly. "People like Jeremy, they always do." James smiled. "You're not wrong." That night, I sat in my motel room and mapped it out. Every piece, every move. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't hurt. I was ready. But I needed one more confirmation. I opened the security app again and fast-forwarded through the last few days. Found them in the kitchen again. Becky on her phone. Jeremy with a man I hadn't seen before. Real estate agent logo on his polo. They were going through paperwork. Becky laughing again. Not like the woman I married. Lighter. Effortless. Like a woman who thought she'd won. That was her second mistake, because I'd just started to fight. Something was wrong. Something beyond betrayal. Beyond the forged signature. The empty bank account. The stranger walking my dog. I felt it in my bones, in the way a soldier feels the shift in air before an ambush. I wasn't just being left. I was being erased, replaced, maneuvered out of my own life with surgical precision. And yet, she slipped. She left that initial wrong. Left my security system online. Left a trail. The moment I saw that unfamiliar man in the kitchen with Jeremy, a guy with a leather binder and polished shoes, I knew what was coming. A sale. A quick one. Probably under market value. I rewound the footage. He handed Becky a stack of printed pages. One of them had a logo on the top. I paused it. Zoomed in. Spencer Realty Group. That name didn't mean anything at the time, but something about the way he moved through the house, like he already owned it, like he didn't need to be told where the light switches were. It stuck with me. I called James. Told him what I saw. Asked him to dig. By morning, he called back. "Name's Daniel Spencer," he said. "Licensed in Washington and Idaho. Does quick turnaround sales. Mostly cash deals. But get this. He's worked with Jeremy before. 3 different properties. 2 of them ended in civil complaints." My mouth went dry. "This is bigger," I said. "This isn't just an affair. This is a pattern." "Looks that way," James replied. "And I'm not the only one who's noticed. I flagged this to a contact I have in the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. They're interested." For a second, I couldn't speak. I stared at the wall in my motel room, textured plaster painted beige. I'd fought in cities torn apart by corruption. I'd seen greed up close. But I never thought it would come home like this, wrapped in paperwork, real estate listings, and fake smiles. I didn't know if Becky was a pawn or a player, but either way, I was going to end the game. A few days later, I visited the bank in person. Not the branch we'd always used, the other one, where I'd opened my private account. I brought every piece of documentation James had assembled, my ID, my deployment orders, a copy of the real signature from my driver's license, and the forged application Becky had submitted. The loan officer's face went pale. I processed this," he said, voice small. "I didn't realize—" "You were given false information," I said. "You're not the target here. But I need a formal fraud report, and I need to freeze any pending disbursements." He nodded. "Of course." That night, Becky texted me. "Who have you been talking to at the bank?" Jeremy said someone was asking questions. I didn't reply. Let her wonder. A day later, James sent me a copy of a subpoena draft. "We're pulling everything. Spencer, Jeremy, the transfers, title changes, it's all coming together." I opened the footage again. This time I watched with different eyes. Observing small gestures, sideways glances, Who took the lead? Who held the papers? Spencer did most of the talking. Jeremy stood close but deferential, like a junior partner. Becky laughed when they mentioned dates. She pointed at the fireplace, the hardwood floors. Things I'd built, laid down, stained with my own hands. They were selling my home like it was a product, like I was already gone, and for the first time in weeks, I felt something sharp. Not anger, not sadness, something cleaner. Resolve. That's when the dreams started. Flashes of home, but distorted. I'd walk into the living room and find Jeremy sitting in my chair. Becky smiling at him like I never existed. Photos on the wall had his face, not mine. My dog growled at me. I'd wake up sweating, chest tight, hands curled into fists. Even my subconscious knew I was being replaced, so I focused harder. James got a hit. Spencer had taken earnest deposits from someone. Cash buyer, he said. Unclear who, but the deposits went to Spencer's holding account. From who? I asked. He hesitated. That's where it gets weird. Not Jeremy. Someone named Daniel Spencer. Wait, he paid himself? Looks that way. Might be laundering, might be hiding a bigger partner. We're digging. I leaned forward, voice low. You think they've done this to others? Absolutely. And if they've touched VA loans, that's federal. We'll need to hand it over soon. I closed my eyes. Images from Kandahar flashed. Behind my lids, charred metal, broken walls, the sound of distant gunfire. And now this quiet war, in my own backyard. But I had one weapon they didn't expect. I never stopped watching, and they just gave me something better than any confession. They gave me motive. The house I'd bought with combat pay, the one I'd fixed with my own hands, was about to be listed without my consent. That thought clung to me like damp wool. I couldn't shake it. Not while eating, not while walking through Spokane under an assumed name, not even when I closed my eyes at night. They were moving fast, too. Fast, which meant they were getting nervous. 2 days after James confirmed the deposit trail, Becky left me a voicemail. Her voice was all high-pitched concern, like the woman who once told me she missed my hands on her back at night. Nathan, we need to talk. The bank called me about some kind of mistake with the loan. Jeremy says someone's been asking questions. If this is about the divorce, can't we just talk like adults? Like adults. Same phrase from her email. Neat symmetry. I didn't call back. Instead, I checked the camera feed again. And there it was. Jeremy and Spencer standing in my living room with a tape measure and clipboard. Spencer pointed to the wall I'd patched after our first dog scratched. It up. The fireplace mantle I'd built after Mom died, and I needed something to do with my hands. Jeremy leaned in and said something I couldn't quite hear. So I turned up the volume. List by the end of the week, Spencer was saying. Got a buyer already. Cash. How much? List at $470K, take $420K. Everyone's happy. I froze the feed. James was beside me in the motel room, watching it all with the expression of a man who's watched too many people think they're untouchable. You getting this? I asked. He was already recording the screen on his phone. Every word. I leaned back against the headboard, staring at the tiny, perfect betrayal unfolding in real time. It wasn't just the sale. It was the way they walked through the house like it was already theirs. Like my time, my sacrifice. My life was just some mistake to be swept aside. And then Spencer said something I'll never forget. The husband? Military guys are all the same. They make noise, but they've got deployments, responsibilities. He'll take a settlement to make it go away. I didn't blink. Didn't move. Didn't say a word. But something in me broke clean. And what replaced? It wasn't rage, it was clarity. I forwarded the feed to Agent Patel at the FBI with a 2-word message. Happening now. 30 minutes later, I watched from down the street as black SUVs rolled in. FBI jackets visible even from the shadows. Jeremy and Spencer were let out in handcuffs. The house lit up with searchlights. Boxes were carried out. Documents, devices, records. Becky pulled up 10 minutes later. She stood on our lawn, my lawn, hands over her mouth, watching it all fall apart. I didn't move, didn't approach, just watched her from the car. She looked smaller than I remembered. Not fragile, just unfamiliar. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just stood there. And in that moment, I couldn't tell if she was the architect of all this, or just another casualty. My phone rang. "Agent Patel, we got them," she said. "On tape, discussing conspiracy, wire fraud, and sale of property under false pretenses." And, "Becky? She just arrived, distressed. But we're still determining her level of involvement." I stared at her through the windshield. She looked around, lost. Then her eyes met mine, just for a second. There was something there. Recognition. Maybe regret, but it didn't matter anymore. Patel asked, "What do you want to do?" I didn't answer right away. 13 years of marriage passed through my mind like frames in a film reel. Our wedding, our first dog, the fight over whether to paint the guest room blue or green, her falling asleep on my chest the night before, my first deployment. Her voice when I told her I'd re-upped. I thought about the cold water in Kandahar, the single word I'd typed, understood, and I finally said, "I just want what's right." She nodded. "We'll need a formal statement. Tomorrow." Of course. That night, I sat on the motel bed and stared at the ceiling fan. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel vindicated. I just felt tired, but under that exhaustion was something else. A quiet steadiness. A sense that I'd held the line, that I'd come home to a battlefield I hadn't expected, and didn't flinch. And yet, deep down, I knew there was still one piece missing. One question I hadn't answered. Was Becky a bystander, or had she helped pull the trigger? The FBI took it from there. Jeremy and Spencer were booked, questioned, processed. The tapes spoke for themselves. But when it came to Becky, things got murkier. No direct statements. No explicit admissions. Her name was all over the documents, the refinance application, the shared bank transfers. But the lines between manipulation and collusion blurred fast when lawyers got involved. James called the next morning, voice calm but tight. "They're keeping her out for now? No arrest? Yet. They're still figuring out how deep she was." "Did she know?" I asked. "That's the question." I sat in silence for a long time, the phone warm against my ear. Outside my motel window, the world was moving on. Cars and traffic, teenagers smoking near the bus stop, a dog barking 2 streets away. Life went on, oblivious. I wasn't angry. Anymore. I wasn't even sure I cared, but I needed the truth. "Find out," I told him. A week passed. I gave my full statement to the FBI. Timeline, documents, security footage, financial records. Agent Patel was meticulous. She kept her tone clinical, but something in her eyes shifted when I spoke about the betrayal. When I explained how I'd built that house with calloused hands and war money and quiet hope. She didn't say it, but I saw it. She understood. "This isn't just a paper case for you," she said at the end. "No," I said. "It's personal." 3 days later, James called again. "Thought you'd want to know. They found more." "What kind of more?" "A pattern," he said. "Other couples. Other homes. Jeremy and Spencer weren't just freelancing. They were running an operation. Preying on military families. Always the same formula. Woman isolated during deployment. Whispers of infidelity. Refinancing under stress. Homes sold below value to prearranged buyers. Fast cash. Clean paperwork. Until now." My stomach dropped. "How many?" 11 families so far. Could be more. I swallowed. My chest ached. Not from betrayal this time, but recognition. Because I'd seen those men, overseas, on base, laughing about care packages, video calls with kids, promises of vacations after service. And now I knew. Some of them came home to nothing. "They'll get justice?" I asked. "They will. Because you started the chain. You didn't walk away." That hit harder than I expected. All I'd wanted at first was to reclaim what was mine. The house, my money, my name. I hadn't planned on being a trigger for anything larger. But sometimes war picks you, even when you've laid down your weapon. That night, Becky called again. I let it ring. Then came the text. I never meant for it to get this far. I stared at it for a long time. My thumb hovered over the screen. Then I replied, Did you know what they were doing? She started typing, then stopped, then started again. Finally, one message came through. Not at first. And with those 3 words, everything collapsed into place. I could see it clearly now. Her standing on the edge of a line she never thought she'd cross, watching Jeremy work his charm, feeling like she had no other choice, or maybe too curious, to resist. The forged signature, the loan, the quiet trust that I would never notice, that I wouldn't fight back. Maybe she thought I was weak. Maybe she forgot what I'd seen, what I'd survived. I didn't respond. Instead, I met with Agent Patel one final time. Gave them the rest of the footage, the email backups, the text logs. Anything that could help the other families. Anything that could make this stop. She looked at me across the desk. We can't promise charges for her. It depends on the evidence. I don't care about charges, I said. I care that she never gets to do this to anyone else. Patel nodded. That night, I drove past the house. One last time. The for sale sign was gone. The lawn was patchy. The windows dark. It didn't feel like mine anymore. Not because it had changed, but because I had. I never met Becky at the park. She'd texted again. Let's talk face to face. You deserve that much. But what I deserved wasn't more words. It was answers, and I wasn't sure she could give me any. Instead, I followed the plan. Parked 2 streets over. Waited with James, both of us watching the front of the house from inside his truck. At 9:45 a.m., Becky drove away, heading straight toward Riverfront Park. 10 minutes later, a familiar car pulled up. Daniel Spencer, even with his reputation in shambles, even knowing the FBI had eyes on him, he showed up like it was business as usual. Clipboard in hand, real estate logo still printed proudly on his polo. Jeremy greeted him on the porch. They didn't look nervous. They looked confident. That's what got me, that they still believed they could outmaneuver the truth. We stayed put. I tapped into the security feed from my phone, watched them walk through my living room like it belonged to them. Spencer was measuring wall space for photos. Jeremy opened the back door to check the view. They were laughing, and then Spencer said the thing that sealed it. I've got a buyer lined up, same guy from the Bellingham deal. Cash, no inspections. How much? Jeremy asked. We list at $470K, settle for $420K. We'll roll your cut into escrow under a contractor credit. Clean? Jeremy asked. Spencer smirked. Cleaner than Kandahar. My hands went cold. James looked at me. That, enough for you. I didn't answer. Just sent the footage to Agent Patel with a 2-word caption. Happening now. Within half an hour, the street filled with unmarked vehicles. I watched from the rear view as agents surrounded the house. Weapons. Low, movements coordinated. Spencer came out first. Confused. Hands raised. Jeremy was next, arguing until they cuffed him. The look on his face when they pulled him out of my front door was burned into me. Not fear, entitlement. Like he still didn't understand why this was happening. I stayed in the car, watched it all from the safety of silence. Until I saw her. Becky. She'd come back. And when she stepped out of her car and saw the agents, the cuffs, the flashing lights, she froze. Her eyes scanned the scene, like someone looking for proof they were still dreaming. Then she saw me. I didn't move, didn't wave, didn't blink. I just stared. She took a step forward, mouth opening like she had something to say. But she didn't. There was nothing left to say. Later that afternoon, James and I met with Agent Patel. Her voice was steady, but there was something different in her tone now, like even she hadn't expected just how deep it went. They talked, she said. Both of them, fast. Spencer gave us names, dates, 3 more properties in escrow. Jeremy's trying to cut a deal. Said he was only the middleman. And, Becky? I asked. Patel paused. Not arrested. Yet. My jaw tensed. She's saying she didn't know. That Jeremy told her you had taken money, forged papers. That he was helping her protect herself. She's claiming she was manipulated. Do you believe her? I asked. Patel didn't answer directly. She knew enough to benefit. Whether that means guilt, that's for the courts. James leaned forward. What do you want to do, Nate? I looked down at my hands. Calloused. Scarred. The same hands that built a house, filled a fridge, signed enlistment papers. The same hands she used to hold when she was scared. What did I want? Revenge? No. Revenge was a fire. I didn't need more. Heat. What I wanted was weight, consequence, not punishment. Truth, not destruction. I want her to live with it, I said finally. I want her to look at that house and know it never belonged to her. I want her name off the deed, off the bank, records, off everything. And I want every family they hurt to know the truth. James nodded. We can do that. Later that night, I got one last message from Becky. Just 3 words. I'm so sorry. I stared at it for a long time. Then I deleted it. No reply. Not because I hated her. Because I finally understood. She wasn't the woman I married. She was the one who watched a man steal my life piece by piece and handed him the tools. I never saw Becky again after that day on the lawn. She never reached out again. Not really. Not beyond that last message. And I never answered. There was nothing left to say that wouldn't make the silence more meaningful. James handled the legal side like a surgeon. Clean, efficient, decisive. The forged refinance was nullified. The home title reverted entirely to me. Becky waived any claims to the property, my pension, or the bank accounts. In exchange, I agreed not to press charges, not because I wanted to protect her, but because I needed to walk away clean. No entanglements, no endless court battles, no slow-burning war that would drag me back into the wreckage. It was over. The FBI kept me informed. Jeremy pled out 8 years. Spencer got 12. Turned out the scheme stretched across 3 states, 11 military families, just like me. The same MO, target, isolate, extract, discard. But because I pushed, because I didn't go quietly, it unraveled. The whole thing came apart. Sometimes I still think about the others. The ones who came home to empty driveways, bank accounts drained, memories sold out from under them. Guys who'd trusted too much, who'd believed their homes were waiting. All did. That was the story we told ourselves out there. That we were serving so the world back home could keep spinning. So love could wait. So they could wait. Sometimes it does. Sometimes it doesn't. I stayed in Spokane just long enough to finalize the paperwork, liquidate the house, and pack what little I had left. The place felt hollow, the air too still. Every room a photograph. I couldn't hang anymore. I didn't say goodbye to Becky, didn't tell anyone I was leaving. I just loaded up my truck and drove west until the map stopped feeling like a threat. Montana, a cabin outside Missoula. 2 bedrooms, 10 acres, a creek that runs loud enough to keep the thoughts at bay. I found it online, paid cash, no one else's. Name on the deed. Just mine. I wake up to the sound of birds now. Brew my own coffee. Take Scout, my German shepherd, for walks through the pines. I do carpentry work for neighbors who leave fresh eggs or firewood in exchange. I don't own a TV, but I do keep one thing taped to the fridge. A letter from a woman in Fort Worth. Her husband was Navy. She wrote to thank me. Said the FBI told her it was my case that brought everything to light. Said they were about to sell their house when Spencer's name popped up. Said she trusted her gut, asked questions, walked away just in time. You don't know me, she wrote, but you saved our home. I read it on the days when the silence gets too loud, when I wonder if all I did was survive, or if I won something in the end. Because here's the thing. I'll never get back those 13 years. I'll never fully understand who Becky became, or when it happened. I won't pretend I didn't miss the signs. I did. Out of love. Out of duty. Out of believing I was building something real. But I wasn't blind in the end, and I didn't go down quiet. Some nights, when the fire's low and Scouts curled by my boots, I think about Kandahar. About that first moment, staring at an email, on a cracked screen, alone in a metal bunker, with nothing but grit in my teeth and a 3-sentence goodbye. I was a different man then. I'm not that man anymore. I signed the final divorce papers on a Wednesday. No courtroom, no confrontation. Just a stack of legal documents slid across a smooth oak desk by a clerk who didn't know my name and didn't need to. I signed in blue ink. No flourish, No hesitation. Just 3 letters. NAB, my initials, the right ones. Walked out into the late afternoon sun and stood there on the courthouse steps for a long time, watching people pass, laughing, arguing, checking their phones, holding hands. Life happening. And mine? Mine had finally started again. A few weeks later, Agent Patel called. I almost didn't pick up. I was in the middle of building a screened-in porch at the cabin, hands splintered and aching. But something told me to answer. Jeremy Ryan was sentenced today, she said. 8 years. Fraud, identity theft, conspiracy. I nodded into the silence. Spencer got 12. We're still sorting through all the data. He had records on other families, multiple accounts. Your case broke it wide open. A pause. Then, just thought you'd want to know. I did, not for revenge, but for closure. Thank you, I said quietly. There's something else, she added. We found evidence they were grooming other women, single moms, isolated spouses. It was more coordinated than we thought. I felt my jaw tighten. And Becky? Never charged. We couldn't prove intent beyond the forged signature. She gave a signed confession, waived all claims. She's out of the picture. I nodded again. Still, Patel said, you gave us enough to protect others. That matters. After we hung up, I sat on the cabin's porch steps, watching the creek move slow and stubborn through the trees. Scout wandered nearby, sniffing along the banks, tail wagging like he didn't carry anything from the past. I wanted to be like that, free of it. I hadn't spoken Becky's name in months. James told me she'd moved back to Oregon, started over. New job, smaller town, different name on her badge. People asked me if I hated her. I didn't. Not anymore. I think hate is a form of connection, and I'd severed that tie. All that remained was this clean, almost surgical memory of who she used to be in the hollow space where she used to live in my mind. She made her choices, and so did I. One morning in spring, I found another letter in my mailbox, handwritten. No return address. It was from a Navy vet in Georgia. Said he'd heard about the case, that he'd lost everything, house, marriage, savings. But because of the investigation, he might get some of it back. You didn't just fight for yourself, he wrote. You fought for all of us. I folded the letter carefully and added it to the fridge next to the first one. Those letters aren't trophies. They're reminders that you can lose everything and still not be finished. That sometimes justice comes, quiet, dressed in paperwork and patience. That even betrayal, when faced head-on, can become a beginning. These days, I wake before sunrise, split wood, brew coffee over a cast-iron stove. I work with my hands because they're the one part of me I've never doubted. I don't look over my shoulder anymore. But I do lock the doors, not out of fear, out of habit. There's a difference. Some nights I think about who I used to be. Husband, soldier, believer. Then I remember who I am now. Builder, survivor. Man who came home to ruins and rebuilt with what was left.